And this is what yours should look like for right now. And what I want you to do is I want you to get out 3 colors. And let me, somebody gave me a sticky note thing that doesn't tear off real well. We're going to do some background stenciling. And so you're going to need warm white, shoreline, or whatever color you use to substitute for shoreline if you didn't have it, and Indian turquoise. You're also going to need a snowflake stencil. Any one you have was fine. And drywall tape. This is the one with the squares, the grid. Drywall joint tape if you have it, or a small stencil. This has smaller round holes. And then Punchinello. And now, of course, if you don't have these things, just get a stencil that you have that's like a small design, no words really, unless they're words that you can't really read, because you don't want all the attention to be pulled to the background by somebody trying to read what you stenciled back there. And just go to town if you want to add more things, if you want to add less. Rubber stamps, if you have little rubber stamps of snowflakes, you can add that. So basically we're just going to decorate up the background just to add interest to it, and it adds to the design. It doesn't take away. Oh, also you need like a little, like a soda bottle lid, or if you have a little red Solo cup. I like to use this little plastic container that some washi tape I bought came in. It's just perfect for making those larger circles on the background. So hopefully we all have our paint out. I don't. Get out either a sponge. I usually use a cosmetic sponge to stencil with. And the first thing we're going to do on the background is we're going to add some random snowflakes all around the background. If you can get some into like where the handle is, get a little one in there, but just a dozen, 15 snowflakes with warm white on the background. We're not going to shade and highlight or do anything to them, so put as many as you want. So I'm just going to stencil a few different snowflakes all around the background. If you have bigger snowflakes, it go faster, of course. I'm making a mess on my background, but it's okay. We've got lots of other stuff that goes on here too, so don't have to get too carried away filling up space. So, some of you probably had snow. We don't get it here. I get cold if I just look at it. All right, one done. We're going to use the Punchinello next, or if you have a stencil that's like Punchinello. And what we're going to do is, these are very soft. In the background here, I'm just going to add random clusters of dots with the Punchinello, but I'm going to do it with warm white plus a touch of shoreline. just to make a lighter value. So I'm just going to pick up a little bit of warm white and a little bit of shoreline and make a lighter value of that background color I did. And then I'm just going to randomly add some clusters, and they can go over your snowflakes. It's fine. You can't see that because my palette's in the way, but I did them right over the snowflakes in the corner. So like 5 places, 6 places. I've got 4 so far. If you're using a sponge, you just want to make sure you pounce out most of the paint. Otherwise you'll get bleeds under the stencil or the Punchinello. Okay, I think I want some up here. We're going to do all this, and it looks really pretty now, and then it's going to sink into the background. We are going to use the drywall tape, the drywall joint tape, which is the tape that has the smaller holes. And this time we're going to stencil random clusters of tiny dots with Indian turquoise. And I'm going to use the same sponge that I used before. I just cut the most of the paint color off of it so that I can just continue to use that sponge and not be wasteful. So Indian turquoise.
Marion, did you have a question? Unmute yourself if you did. You're all set?
You good, Marion?
Yes, I am.
Cool. Me too. Now, drywall joint tape, you can buy your own. Oh, see, I didn't get that dark enough. The only place I've been able to find this drywall joint tape is at Lowe's. For some reason, Home Depot just doesn't have it. But just some random clusters of Indian turquoise. And it's hard for me to see it in the light that I have here, because it's wet and it's bright. But again, just random spots. We have 2 more things to do to this background. Well, 3 more things. Now we have the drywall tape, the mesh, and that's done with Indian turquoise also. Just adds a little bit different texture to that background. All right, now you want to get out your little cup, your lid, your little solo cup, whatever little round thing you can find. And what we're going to do is you're going to go take that and just run the edge of whatever it is you're going to use through your white paint. And you want to make sure you get white paint on all of it. And then we are going to come back and we're going to put some circles, bigger circles on there. And they don't have to be full circles. They can be parts of circles. Just to add some more interest to that background. We're acting like the background is the star of the show, but it's not really. One, two, three, four, five, six, seven. Do I want to add any more? Yeah, I think I do. Maybe right here. So wherever you want, just add these little circles. Or don't if you don't feel like it. So you already have the next two colors we're going to use on your palette. So we're going to do some background highlighting and shading, or shading and highlighting. I wrote it one way, but I do it the other way. And I need to dry a couple of my circles a little bit before I get into this. So if you have a heat gun or a hair dryer, you probably want to go ahead and hit your piece with that a little bit just to dry it. And I use this Ranger heated craft pen that I got on Amazon. And it's not so hot that you're going to burn the hair off your hands or anything. And it's quiet. Hair dryers seem to be really loud. So it's like $25 on Amazon. Just make sure you order the American one. Unless you're in Europe, then you can get the European one. But I'm going to dry it just a little bit. So we are going to dry brush some highlighting with warm white. And it's just going to be kind of random areas. You probably want to avoid any spots on these circles that are still kind of wet. But I like to use, if I can find it, a Langnickel short round sable brush to dry brush with, but you can use whatever brush you feel comfortable using for dry brushing. Some people like to use old flat scruffy brushes or stencil brushes, but this is the brush I like to use. It starts off pointy, and let's see if I can find, here's one that's fairly new. And it's pointy, and then after I use it a while, it starts to lose its point and kind of rounds out, and I like it that way the best. And then towards the end of its life, it gets short and flat and stubby like this. That's still good for little cheeks and stuff, but it's not my favorite. My favorite place for it to be is here. But I'll show you how I like to dry brush, and then you can go and do your own dry brushing. But we're going to dry brush with warm white. And so what I like to do is take this short round sable, and I'm going to load it with some paint. And then I'm going to twist it around on my palette. I'm going to go in clockwise, counterclockwise motion. Kids these days don't even know what that means, right? There has to be a way we can describe this digitally. But I'm just going to do it in a circle back and forth. And what I'm doing is I'm working that paint through the brush. Your brush is dry. You didn't add any water to it. That's why it's called a dry brush. And then what I do is I go to my towel back here and kind of wipe out a lot of the paint. The next thing I do is I go to this part of my hand, and I start scrubbing it on my hand in a circle. When I hit my hand, it's cold. And as I scrub it, it loses its coolness. And once it's not cold anymore, that's a good indicator to me that I can go to my piece and start dry brushing. So I'm going to start scrubbing, and you should have to scrub a little bit, some paint on in these larger areas, just to, once again, break up the background a little bit. tone down some of the stenciling that we did. And when you reload your brush, you go back through the whole course of loading it, rubbing it on your palette, wiping it off, going to your hand. I've been dry brushing this way for a long time, and it just seems to be the easiest way for me. But you might have a way that you like better. So please, do it the way that you're most comfortable dry brushing with. That's just how I do it. So I'm just going to break up the background a little bit with some warm white. So when you see me painting, I usually have paint all across the back of my hand. Get a little inside that handle on that cup. And we'll be doing some more dry brushing on the cup, so you'll get lots of practice. Once you get that done, you can wash out your dry brush. Sometimes when we dry brush, we'll dry brush with one color, and then we won't wash our brush out, but we'll pick up a lighter value or warm white or something to lighten up the value, and then we'll dry brush a lighter color before we wash our brush out. So I try to remember to tell you when to wash your brush out. Another good thing about these short round sables is you can dry them on your towel pretty easily and dry brush another color right away. We are going to float some shading, and that's going to go all the way around the outside edge and around all the elements of the design, including the snowman that's not painted yet. And that's going to be done with a flat brush and a side load of Indian turquoise. Indian turquoise, just your regular side load float, going all the way around the outside edge. We'll do that first. Looks like I need some more color in there. All right, that's better. It's not a dark color, but it softens and kind of blends the backgrounds.
And you have
Okay, I'm using a pretty large brush for this float around the outside edge because I want it to be a wider float. So this is actually a 3/4 inch flat, but when I go to float around the design, I'm going to drop down to like a 16 or something. But as this paint dries, you'll be able to see that float a little better. Oh, there's the one I was looking for. Clean up my cup a little bit. So I've gone around the outside edges. Now I'm going to go around the cup and the hat and the snowman and the tea bag label. Again with side load floats of Indian turquoise. We just want to pop those off the background a little bit. You don't have to worry about the bottom edge of the cup because we put snow on top of that. So, yay, you get to skip one part. And again, there's a lot of stuff that goes on the background behind this little snowman, so it doesn't have to be a perfect float. But there are little spots that peek out from behind the greenery, so you do want to have the float in there. And besides, it's good practice, right? Can never practice floating enough. I'm glad it shows up when it dries, because when you're doing it, it doesn't look like you're adding anything. For sure. So we are going to work on the cup next. And so you're going to need shoreline, warm white, and deep midnight blue. So we are going to dry brush some highlighting on our cup with shoreline, and then as I explained earlier, we're going to not wash out our brush. We're going to pick up some warm white to get a lighter value shoreline and dry brush brighter highlighting. So our highlighting is going to go through the center of the cup here, and it's pretty wide. The first one was shoreline, and on the handle, just not where it connects to the cup, but on this outer edge through the center. Okay, so shoreline first, and then shoreline plus warm white. And now I'm getting my array of colors on my hand. So I'm going to go through the center of the cup, but it's pretty wide because the cup is pretty wide. It shows up, but not a lot. And then I'm also going to go on this handle. So then I'm going to just, on my dirty brush, pick up some warm white, and you'll get a lighter value shoreline. And you should be able to see that. If you're doing it on your hand, you'll see it, the graduation on your hand or on your piece of denim or whatever you're using. And you're going to dry brush brighter highlights, but you're going to keep this brighter highlight more towards the right center of the cup, and it's not as wide as your original dry brush. Then you can wash your brush out when you're done with that brighter highlight. You want to get your pattern out and put the pattern on for the lettering and the little doodle. I called it a doodle, but the snowman that makes the O. we have that on there before we do our shading. Or if you want to write something else on your cup, now would be the time to do that. So you're just going to need a liner brush. I can't tell what size this is, but usually I use like a 1, or you can use a 10-aught. Whatever brush you feel comfortable using, really. And you're going to line that lettering with warm white, thinned warm white. And what I like to do is, when I load my brush, I kind of flatten it out. So I don't know if you can see that, but it's kind of flat, so it gives me a wider line. And there's no law that says when you paint a letter, you have to do it all in one stroke. So you don't have to do this S all in one stroke. I like to start at the top and work down. I still have the shakes. I don't know if you can tell. And then I do the bottom section. So you don't have to do lettering like your handwriting. This is where you can tell I'm still not 100%. And then we're just going to do our little doodle of our snowman for the O.
It's like thinking in terms of calligraphy, because
Yes,
you don't do it all in one fell swoop.
exactly. And get the little hairs off your brush, that's helpful. And then you add your little stirrups. Sometimes I like to go through and do all my vertical lines and then come back and do the horizontals. And sometimes I like to do it with the piece upside down, just because then you're not automatically going the way your hand is trained. Ooh, S's are my enemy. Also, with warm white, you're going to water it down a little bit. There are some little checks along the top and the bottom. You can do those with a small flat brush, or you can use your liner brush flattened out, Let me see if I have a tiny flat brush out. I don't. So I'm just going to use my liner brush. There's no specific number of stripes or dots that checks that you have to have. Just wanted to add some more decor to the cup. Now you're going to need some paper. It could be your instructions or whatever, but just kind of mask off the sides of your cup a little bit. Don't worry too much about down here. But we want to add some light spattering onto the cup with warm white. So I'm going to thin down some warm white with a flat brush. So I got it loaded up with thin down warm white. And I'm the old school. I beat 2 brushes together to do my spattering. So I'm just going to do some light spattering on the cup. And if it gets off into the background, don't worry about it too much. Alright. So with Deep Midnight Blue, we are going to float shading down the outside edge of the main part of the cup. We'll do that first. A nice wide float. Let's go on the handle next to the cup. So I'm going to turn mine this way. So Deep Midnight Blue on the handle here right next to the cup. So that ends up being like a back-to-back float right there. And I've got to turn it this way. You also want to go across the bottom of the cup. So I'm going to go with a kind of a thin float all the way around the outside edge of the handle. And I want to do across the top. And you're also going to do around the inside edge of the handle. On the handle, but on the inside edge. We're going to go back to the lettering that we did. And, oh, I forgot to give my snowman a nose. Did you give your snowman a nose? Better do that. He has a little nose. All right, and just like any lettering that I do, if you've ever painted with me, we are going to add a shadow of thin, deep midnight blue to the left side, top and left of each letter on the cup, and even on the snowman. You're going to go to the left side. Top and left. I don't know what I was thinking. So all I'm doing is thinning down some deep midnight blue and adding a little line right next to the lettering across the top of any part of the lettering and the left side. Not on the right side, just on the left side. And that's just your liner brush and thinned deep midnight blue. And that just helps pop the lettering off the background a little bit. Ooh, that's too dark. Thin it down quite a bit. There we go. And it can be hit or miss. You don't have to do it completely if you run out of paint. And just enough, I don't know if you can see, but it's how much more snow, the word snow pops off the cup than happens does. And if you paint anything of mine and it has lettering on it, most likely you had to do this. I try not to do it, but it doesn't look right to me without it. So if I don't get all the paint out to the side edges, that's okay. Every time I reload the brush, I start somewhere near the center again and lay down most of the paint towards the center and then walk out to the side edges. So there you have a nice fluffy snowball. So I just like doing them this way. To me, it's a little faster than basing them in and shading and highlighting. And it looks a little more like snow. We need to let that dry and then we'll put the pattern on for his eyes, his nose, and his mouth. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to go up here to the hat and work on it a little bit. So we're going to dry brush some highlighting on the hat with Indian turquoise. And I'm going to use the same brush I smooshed with, so I got to dry it out a little bit. So we're going to dry brush the highlighting with Indian turquoise on his hat, and I'm going to do across the top pretty wide, but then I'm going to narrow it down to the right center, kind of. If that makes any sense at all. And this one is another one of those where we're going to pick up some warm white on our dirty brush and dry brush brighter highlights. So you don't want to wash your brush out yet. So top of the hat and the hat brim with Indian turquoise. Then pick up a little warm white on your dirty brush so you get a lighter value Indian turquoise. And you can see it on my hand. And I'm just going to dry brush basically in the right center, not all the way like I did on the entire top of the hat, but basically just the right center and a little bit through the center of the hat brim. Then you can wash your brush out. We're going to need a little lamp black to float some shading with. Okay, basically the lamp black, you're going to float all four sides of the top of the hat, and then you're going to float just the ends of the hat brim. And when you float the ends of the hat brim, you're going to walk that color towards the center a little bit. So float lamp black across the top of the hat, down the sides of the hat, and above the hat band. So I'm going to turn my little guy. And this is good because if you got any shading on your hat when you float it around your design, you can fix that up right quick. And then I'm going to go across the top. And on these sides, just a regular float on the sides and just kind of walk that color in. Try to stay on the hat band though, unlike me. Easy peasy. Then you want to put the pattern on your snowman for his mouth, his eyes, and his nose. You can go ahead and put the pattern on for his pipe also. We'll work on the snowman's face. So you're going to need cactus flower. If you don't have cactus flower, you could use spice pink or dragon fruit or any kind of cheeky color. And burnt orange, golden straw, and burnt umber. So we're going to give him some nice round cheeks. And that's going to be with cactus flower, of course, because the other colors would look stupid as cheeks. But nice round cheeks. They sit right under his eye and kind of right on top of his mouth. And when you go to do this guy on this side, you can just go ahead and dry brush right through the nose. So you don't have to worry about working around the nose. So cactus flower, dry brushed. If you prefer to wash them on, you can do it however you like to do cheeks. I'm easy. So I'm just going to give him some nice round cheeks. And you can go ahead and wash your dry brush out after you've got some cheeks on there. Now, I'm going to show you how I like to paint carrot noses. And you can try it or you can do it your own way. But I like to paint noses. Carrots aren't just flat. They have bumps and lumps and grooves and things. So what I like to do is I like to paint them using what I call shape following strokes. And so I like to use a round brush, or you can use a larger liner brush. But what I'm going to do first is I'm going to load my brush with burnt orange. And then I'm going to start at the back side, the wider side of the carrot nose. And I'm going to stroke it on, and I'm using a shape following stroke. I'm using a C stroke. I'm thinking like a carrot. It's round and it's not flat. So don't line them like this. Use them to form the shape of the carrot. So as you go along, it's going to be a curved stroke all the way to the tip of the nose. Okay, don't worry too much about the rough edge on the bottom because we'll fix that in a minute. Okay. And this is also, I work wet on wet on my noses. So as I get to the end of the nose, I basically end up just tapping the color on. So then the next thing I do is I just wipe my brush out. I don't wash it. And I pick up some golden straw, which is my highlight color on that dirty brush. And again, using shape following strokes, I'm going to start at the top and just stroke some golden straw about halfway down, but try not to make it stop it all in the same place. Easier said than done. Okay, so now I've got my highlight across the top of my nose, and again when I got to the end it was kind of just tap some color. Then I'm going to wipe that brush out again, and I'm going to pick up a little burnt umber. This one you get to turn your piece around, and the same way I stroked the highlight on the top, I'm going to stroke the shading along the bottom. Again, shape following strokes. They can go up into the yellow, but try not to drag them all the way up, and again try not to get them all the same length, but you just go all along the bottom till you get to the end and just kind of tap. So now I've got my shading and my highlighting, and it looks rough like a carrot, has ridges. We could go a step further and line little hairs, but I don't ever do that. And then I just wipe my brush out again and pick up a little warm white, which you should have on your palette, and I tap a highlight just across the top of the nose. It's dropped down a little bit, it's not right on the top edge, and as the nose gets thinner, the highlight gets a little thinner. And we have one more thing to do to the nose, but it needs to dry. So that is how I like to do carrot noses, because I think they look a little more carroty. So we're going to work on the eyes and the mouth next. We have one more thing to do to the nose, but it kind of needs to dry a little bit. So you're going to need lamp black, shoreline if you can still get into it, it's on your palette, Indian turquoise, and warm white. So we're going to just paint in the eyes completely with lamp black, and you can go ahead and paint your mouth with lamp black. And there, yep, right up under the hat brim. And it's a given. I always paint one eye bigger than the other one. And I always kind of put little stirrups on the ends of my mouth just to finish it off. Go ahead and get out some sable brown and paint in your pipe just so that it has a chance to dry before we get to it. I don't know, my grandpa used to smoke a pipe. I always loved the smell of pipe tobacco. Cigarettes not so much, but pipe tobacco always kind of smelled good. It doesn't have to be opaque. We are going to go back and work on the face a little bit. We are going to take our liner brush and thin down some shoreline or whatever color you substituted. And we're going to line a shadow above each eye. So this is on the snowman right above the eye, and some of it's going to get tucked under the hat brim, but it still needs to be there. So liner brush, and what I like to do is, let's see if I can do it on this eye here. I start about halfway, 2/3 of the way down on one side of the eye on the point of the liner brush, and then as I come around the top, I flatten it and then come back to a point on the opposite side. And that just gives me a shadow. It just kind of sinks his eye back into the snow a little bit, so it's not sitting right on top. Now the one eye that's right next to his hat brim, you're not going to be able to do that quite as easily, but you still want to get a little bit of shoreline above that eye. We're also going to float some shading on our snowman with shoreline, and it's going to go under the hat brim here in the back of his head and above the cup and above and below the pipe, and that's with shoreline, and that's a regular side load float. We just want to tuck the snowman under his hat a little bit, So when you get to his eyes, you can just stop. And then continue on the other side of the eye. And then above the cup, above the pipe where it's up on the snowman, and below the pipe. And then there's one more place, and that's going to be across the bottom of the nose, and that's going to be right on top of that burnt umber shading that you stroked on. So you're just going to take some very well blended out shoreline and go across the bottom of the nose. And what that does is it makes his nose look cold. We're going to work on his eyes next. And what we're going to do is we're going to line this crescent shaped stroke in the bottom of his eyes. Now, I call it a crescent shaped stroke, but you don't have to do it like a stroke. But I want you to pay attention. This is Indian turquoise, but I leave a little line of the lamp black on the bottom. So the stroke sits down in the bottom of the eye, but not all the way on the bottom edge. You want to leave a little rim of lamp black there. So a liner brush and Indian turquoise. You just want to add those little strokes in the bottom of the eye. And I found that if I just line the bottom edge first, then I can't have a better chance of keeping that black edge. And then I just line the top and fill it in. And you want to make the stroke kind of big. You don't want to keep it real tiny. If it gets too big, you can always go back with lamp black and fix it. Like I'm going to come back in and make that a little bit more of a curve on the top. So Indian turquoise in the bottom of each eye. You see, I want to come back and get the water off my brush, but I just want to make it a little bit deeper here. So I'm going to come in with lamp black and fix that. Alright, I like that better. So, still have Indian turquoise on my liner brush. And what I want to do is I want to line a highlight by picking up a little bit of warm white and kind of blending it on my palette. And all I'm going to do is I'm going to line this lighter mix through the center of that blue stroke I just did, just to add a little bit of a highlight to it. He has some little eyelashes, and they're just across the top a little bit, and just a touch at what I would consider to be the outside corner of each eye. And you can line those individually, or you can take your liner brush, thin down some lamp black paint, and then what I like to do is just set my brush down in the center of the top of the eye, inside the eye, and then I just kind of push my brush out a little bit and make some little squiggles for eyelashes. And squiggle a little bit at the corner. So set it down inside the black of the eye and just push it out a little bit so you get some little squiggles. And then a little squiggle at the corner of each eye. And there is a little highlight of warm white inside the black part of the eye. And then you also want to touch a little warm white in the very center of that blue stroke. So I'm just going to set down some warm white in the top part of the eye. And then I'm just going to tap a little warm white in the very center of that highlight you lined on that blue stroke. Makes a big difference in his eyes. So for the pipe, we've already basted in sable brown. You're going to need warm white, burnt umber, and lamp black. Those should all be on your palette. But if you need fresh, you want to get those out now. Alright, we are going to dry brush some highlighting. Now if you need to, you can put the pattern on for the bowl of the pipe, which is just a little curved line there. But if you don't need to, that's even better. We're going to dry brush some highlighting on the stem of the pipe and on the bowl of the pipe with sable brown plus warm white. And you want to dry brush, and this is going to go across basically the whole bowl of the pipe. And you want to get some on the stem if you can. If you can't, it's no big deal. Alright, and then you're going to pick up more warm white on that dirty brush. And you're going to dry brush a little bit brighter highlighting, but this is going to stay on the right side of the bowl. So you want to lighten it up, and that's going to go on the right side of the bowl. Then you can wash your brush out. So we are going to float some shading. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to float shading inside the bowl. And that's going to be 2 C strokes, a C stroke on each side with burnt umber. So corner load your brush. Not a big wide corner load, just a little one. And float a little C stroke inside the bowl. And then you can flip your brush over and float the other side, just to fill the bowl up with darker brown. Then what you want to do, you want to float some burnt umber where the pipe is stuck in his mouth. We are going to darken some of this shading, so don't worry that it doesn't seem as dark as it does in the pictures. And then you're also going to go down the sides of the bowl with burnt umber. So when you do this, the side that's closest to the stem of the pipe, it's going to go a little ways past where the stem connects, if that makes any sense, but not all the way to the bottom. So you just kind of stop mid-pipe, I guess is what we call it. And then you're also going to go down the other side. But that float can go all the way down and kind of curve around the bottom a little bit. I was looking for my mop brush. If you like to mop your floats, this is a good area to do it. Just to soften it a little bit. Okay, so I'm going to deepen the shading by picking up a little bit of lamp black with my burnt umber, just to deepen it. If you have soft black, that's a good color if you don't want to mix colors. And I'm going to deepen the shading where the pipe comes out of his mouth and in the bowl. And then another little hair on my brush. Just down the right side of the pipe. So not the other side, just the right side. And this is going to sound weird, but I wanted to kind of highlight the top edge that top front edge of the pipe, but I didn't want it to be real bright. So what I did is I floated it with sable brown with its base color, just to pull that front edge a little forward. So just a nice soft float of sable brown to pull the front edge of that the bowl of the pipe forward a little bit. Now with your liner brush and warm white, you don't have to thin it down. You kind of want to load your liner brush with warm white and then wipe it out on your palette a little bit so it's kind of dry. And all I'm going to do is I'm going to line a highlight on the stem and on the bowl. I don't want it to be watered down warm white. I want it kind of dry. And then while you're at it, you can also line warm white across the middle of the hat brim with the same dried brush. And then I also did a few little highlight things. Need a little more paint on the top of the hat. So we're going to work on the tea bag tag next. So we're going to need, and a lot of these you might have on your palette, we're going to work, I know this tea bag tag, you can use all these colors. Warm white, lamp black, burnt umber, deep midnight blue, cactus flower, and razzleberry, or whatever color you use to paint the hat band. Okay, now I didn't put the pattern on for my string, so I'm just going to wing it. The string is just coming out of the cup and going down to the tea bag tag. The first thing we're going to do is we're going to line that string. And I don't know why, but I picked up sable brown, warm white, and a touch of lamp black. Why? I don't know. But I just mixed those three colors together to get something that wasn't white or gray. I don't really know what you'd call this color. It's not that pretty. But all I'm going to do is just liner brush with that lamp black, sable brown, warm white mix. And I'm just going to line that string. And of course, it's going to have shading on it. So I'm just going to take burnt umber and shade just where it's going into the cup and where it's going behind the tag. And then of course, you're going to line a little bit of a highlight with warm white through the center part of the string. So I'm going to start up here and kind of hit and miss down the string. Now the tag itself, I'm going to float some burnt umber, very well blended out. And what I mean by that is, let me get up here where I have some space. Maybe I'll turn my palette around. Here. When I ask you to very well blend out something, what I mean by that is you're going to load your brush and corner load and everything and blend. Normally when you blend, you stay in the same line of paint. But when you want to soften that float a little bit, what you do is you walk away from that line and leave more paint on the palette, so you're softening that float. So when in my directions, or if I say it, when I ask you to very well blend it out, that's what I'm talking about. I want you to really soften that float. So what we're going to do with that is figure out, we're going to float along this bottom edge here. So just along the bottom edge, some very soft burnt umber. Now you get to show me your mad lining skills, because this tag is outlined with a very thin line of deep midnight blue. So liner consistency, thin down your deep midnight blue, get your liner brush, stay on the tip of it, and just very lightly outline this tag. And when you're doing liner work like this, it helps if you stay as straight up and down with your brush as you can, and on the point. And I'm sure you all were told when you were learning to watch where you're going, not where you've been. It really does make a difference. So very thinly outline that tag. And then with cactus flower, you add the little stripe that's just inside the edge. So some more mad lining skills. And if you want to make yours a red rose tea bag and paint a fancy rose on it, go right ahead. I thought about doing that, but I'm not good at roses. Then you're going to thin down a little bit of razzleberry. And in that area where you shaded with burnt umber, you're going to line some shading on this stripe. You're going to do a much better job than I did. Now the snowflake is just lined on with thinned deep midnight blue, and then there's a little warm white highlight on the dots, but I'm afraid I'm going to drag my hand through the dots, so all I'm going to do is line the snowflake for right now, and I'll come back and do the dots later. But if you feel confident you can keep your hand out of your dots on your snowflake, feel free to dot away. And you can make any kind of snowflake you want. They're all different. I just stuck with the simple basic one. Alright, we're going to work on the hat band next. So you're going to need cactus flower. These Post-it notes aren't the best. Warm white and cranberry wine. So we are going to dry brush some highlighting on our hat band with cactus flower. And that's just going to go right through the center. Okay, so just a nice dry brushed highlight through the center of the hat band. And then I just stuck with a nice little plaid. I thinned down some cactus flower and lined a plaid, and then I did another line of plaid with thinned warm white. But you can put whatever you'd like on there if you want dots or stars or whatever. But I just went with a regular old plaid. And keeping it simple. Then I just added an echo of the same plaid with warm white. Okay, we do have to float some shading on here, but I want the plaid to dry. So what I want you to do now is get your pattern out and put the pattern on for the cinnamon stick, and then just for the center stem line of the pine that's coming out of your cup. And you can put in the little lines for your berry twigs. So just the center line for the pine bows, or whatever we want to call them. So we're going to go ahead and base in the cinnamon stick so it can dry while we do the shading on the hat band. And that's based in with light cinnamon, of course. And the other two colors you should have out on your palette, but if you need fresh, go ahead and get some. So whenever you're ready, go ahead and base in your cinnamon stick. And yes, it goes right over the little tip of his hat and a little bit of the snowman's head. That's just with light cinnamon. And it really only needs one coat because there's a lot of stuff on top of it. Okay, we're going to go back to the hat band while our cinnamon stick dries. And basically you're going to float shading down the sides and across the bottom of the hat band with cranberry wine. It's a pretty color. It doesn't get used very often anymore. So down both sides and across the bottom next to the hat brim, just float some cranberry wine. We just want to lighten up the top edge a little bit. So I'm going to float cactus flower plus a touch of warm white. Not a lot. You don't want to make it too light. You add too much white, it looks a little chalky. But I'm just going to float that across the top edge a little bit. Now if you need to put a pattern on for your cinnamon stick, you can go ahead and do that. But I'm just going to wing it. It's just kind of like a rolled up piece of bark, basically. So, but if you need to put the pattern on, I totally understand, and you can go ahead and do that. But what we are going to do is we're going to float a highlight along this front curl. So it's going to be across here, the top of the front curl, and then down the front edge. So it's just a little bit off the left side of that cinnamon stick. And that's going to be with light cinnamon plus a touch of warm white. Not a lot of warm white, just a lighter value light cinnamon is what you're looking for. So I'm just going to go this top edge here. I could probably go a little lighter. And then I'm going to go down just inside that left edge. So we are going to take our liner brush, because that's way too tiny for us to try to float in, and we're going to pick up some burnt umber with our liner brush, and we're going to line the shading next to that little edge, and then we're also going to line some shading inside the top of the cinnamon stick. Think like a cinnamon stick, right? So I'm going to first go down this left side and just darken it so it has some shading underneath that flap. And then I'm just going to line some shading inside the top. And basically I just filled in the whole top of that curl with burnt umber. We are actually going to float some burnt umber shading on our cinnamon stick. And that's going to go at the base of the cinnamon stick where it goes into the cup. So you can float a little burnt umber there. And then I also did a little bit of a float on the back edge to make it look like it curved back around. And there's a little swirl, I don't know if you can see it here, in the top. And you just use some light cinnamon and warm white and add that little swirl in the top that you painted in all burnt umber. You're just going to now add that little swirl with some light cinnamon and warm white and then your liner brush. So I like to start across the top of the little full flap and then work from there. I'm also going to take my liner brush and some thinned burnt umber and just, it's kind of like wood grain, but I'm just going to line a little bit of graining on that cinnamon stick. We're going to come back and add a little wash of light cinnamon on top of all this just to give it a little bit more red, but we want to let those lines dry and our swirl dry. So while we wait for that, what I want you to do is take your liner brush and burnt umber, and we're just going to be working on the pine bows, so don't worry about the little berry twigs right now, but you want to line that center stem with burnt umber, just so you know where you're going to put your pine bows. as I put my hand in that. See, that's why I didn't do dots on my snowflake, because I can't even put a line on without putting my hand in it. You're going to need your 1/4-inch filbert rake or comb brush to do the pine bows. So you want to find that right quick. And let's go ahead and add that little glaze of light cinnamon to our cinnamon stick just to make it red again. It really does make a difference. We've already used the burnt umber, so we just need to get our greens out. We haven't used the greens yet. So forest green, Irish moss, burnt umber, and warm white you have on your palette, and we've already used the burnt umber, so you're good. Has everybody used a filbert rake or comb brush before? Cool, cool, good to see. And just remember, it's like having a bunch of little liner brushes. So you're always going to be using liner consistency paint. You're going to be staying as straight up and down on your brush as you can, and on the tips. So we want to start stroking on these pine needles. And we're going to do it first with thinned forest green, which is the darkest green. And when I load my filbert comb or rake, I always thin down the paint. I pull the puddle off to the side, but I keep it connected to my main puddle, because that way I can just pull some more paint in, not have to scoop it up and bring it over to another puddle. And I thin it down, and then what I like to do is I like to kind of splay my brush out in it. So I'm doing this, so I'm separating those little hairs a little bit, and then I can check it on my palette to see if I'm getting a bunch of little liner like brushes, marks. Okay, just a little hint there. So you load your brush up, and we're going to start. Now you can make your pine needles, mine are a little curvy, you can make them straight if you want. And you want to notice from your pictures that some of them, like this bottom one here, does go over the bowl of the pipe a little bit, but the next one up is behind the pipe, so you want to keep it off the pipe. So just pay attention to that. But I always like to start at the base and start stroking on my dark needles. And when I get to the end of that stem that I drew, I always kind of make them point up or straight and go out beyond the end of that stem a little bit. So this one goes over the pipe a little bit. Kind of reminds me of little eyelashes when I do these, because they're curvy like eyelashes. So this is just the underwear of the pine bow, so you don't have to try to get it as thick or as filled in as it looks on the picture. And now this one is behind, so I'm going to try to stay off of my pipe bowl. And with this layer you can kind of get an idea of how your brush fills and what angle you need to hold it at. And also I might come in and make these needles longer because I want them to cover a little bit more space. But I don't know that until I start getting the underwear of my pine needles on. So this first layer is just kind of like having training wheels on. You're just getting a feel for everything, getting your balance. So yeah, I do want to make these a little longer. And you can do a couple layers of this thin forest green. You don't want to get this one, his nose is going to be in front of this pine needle, so you kind of want to avoid his nose a little bit. And if they go off the edge, that's okay. That's a nice little design feature if the painting draws your eye across and off the edge. It's okay. Don't panic. And here again, the cinnamon stick is in front. Well, actually, it's not. There's a little bit of pine needle going across the cinnamon stick on the lower one. Upper one, the cinnamon stick is in front. But and I'm tucking a little bit of greenery into those little areas in between the cinnamon stick and the snowman and the hat. If you looked at that pine, and it would make sense that it would go and you'd be able to see it underneath the hat. Right? That's my story anyway. I'm going to move on to my lighter needles with Irish moss. And this might be something that I do a couple times, it might be. There's is where we have to learn how to edit ourselves. Just like with anything else, there's good days and bad days for pine needles. I'm not exactly sure what kind of day I'm having yet. Okay, there is one lighter layer. What you can do is pick up a little bit of warm white or even golden straw if you want to keep it more yellow. But a little warm white with your Irish moss and stroke on the lightest needles. And those are going to stay mainly close to the center and out at the ends of the pine bows. And it's going to go top and bottom. It's not going to be relegated to just the top edge. But just kind of through the center. You can lighten up some of those pine needles a little bit. We are going to float a little bit of shading here and there to tuck these things behind the snowman and the pipe and stuff. So don't worry if you got some pine bows that are kind of like hanging out in space. It'll be okay. So now what we're going to do is we're going to float some forest green shading at the base of each of these pine boughs, just to kind of set it into the cup or behind something. So wherever the pine bow, like here where it goes behind the pipe, you want to float some forest green shading. So I'm going to start here and kind of just tuck some forest green shading at the base of this pine bow, just to have it sink into the cup a little bit. And here I'm just going to float next to the pipe. And it's kind of choppy floating because of course you're doing pine bows that aren't like a solid flat edge. So just tap it or feather it in there. Especially here where it's between the snowman and the hat, you want to touch some forest green in there. And then of course we're going to go wherever it's behind the hat. Here too, we have one pine bow that's in front of another one. So you get to decide which one's in the front. And then just tuck a little bit of shading on the one that's behind, just to separate it. Kinda. And you can always come back and add lighter needles if you want to later on. You can just keep going on this until your pine bows overtake the whole thing. So we only have a couple things left to do. We need to line those little twigs that the berries are on, and that's just with burnt umber and a liner brush. And surprisingly, we don't highlight them or shade them, which I don't know what I was thinking when I did that. You can make the twigs a little bit thicker than you did the pine needle stems. I find that when I'm lining these twigs, to get that kind of thin, thick, ragged thing, I like to take my liner brush and kind of twist it roll it around a little bit between your fingers, so you get those thick, thin, kind of raggedy branches. So I'm going to add my berries with cranberry wine. Make them big enough that you can put a highlight dot on them. You can put however many berries you want. It doesn't matter.
I've got to take a short break.
Okay, no problem. We're just doing berries. In fact, when you get done with your berries, let's take another little break. Potty break, snack break. Let's see, what time is it? Okay, so get your berries done and then come back at like 5 minutes to the hour. I'd give you till the hour, but that's a long time. And we're so close to being done. So all of the little berries have little warm white highlight dots on them. I'm going to dot my snowflake while we're going to let it dry. That's dotted with deep midnight blue.
Yeah, it was good. In fact, this one particular time we went out to a place actually.
So I'm just adding the little highlight dots to my snowflake while I'm sitting here eating a cookie and waiting for our break to be over. Is everybody back? Or do we still have somebody gone? We can go ahead and dry brush the smoke that's coming out of the pipe. And it's just a dry brush of warm white. You can make it go straight up. I made mine a little curvy. So just a quick dry brush of warm white. Think like a pipe. Think like you're smoking. So I'm just going to, let's see, am I on there? Yep. I'm just going to dry brush some curly smoke coming out. And it might take a couple of layers. And there. If you want to get all fancy and make it have curls, you can do that. And then one last thing. Can you believe it? Last thing. We're going to put this raggedy, and this is an optional. You don't have to do it unless you want to. But just this rough, ragged edge around the piece. And that's just done with burnt umber. And I always do it with, I know Chris Hoyt has a way to do it, and I have never been able to get the hang of that. So I do it my cheater way, which is, if I find my flat brush, okay, here, this one will work, maybe. I just kind of load my brush like it's a corner load. So I just load one side. I don't thin the paint down or anything. And then I just run it, the paint side, along the edge and just kind of wiggle it and make it have little indents and ragged, just a ragged edge. You can make it go in as far as you want or not. But I don't know, I just kind of like to have that to break up the outside edge a little bit. So that's with burnt umber. Oh, and we have to put some snow on the ground. Let's do that too. Under the cup. I almost forgot that. So there were 3 things to do. I lied. First time ever for you guys. I need some more burnt umber. I'm running out. And if you've, before I get the video out, because I'm going to edit it a little bit, there's some dead time in there. Before you get the notice that that's up, if you want a refresher on how I paint snowmen, I do have a video up on, I believe it's on my Facebook page, but if not, it's on my YouTube channel, which you just have to search Sandy LeFlore and you'll find a YouTube channel for me that has lots of goodies on it. So this doesn't have to take forever. unless you want it to. But this is just another way to add some interest to the piece. You notice now how all that work we did on the background doesn't pop out at us as much anymore because we've added all our snowmen and our greenery, but it's still nice to have it back there. Okay. So I'll give you a couple minutes just to get that done. And then the last thing for sure, I think, I don't know, unless I find something else, is to add this snow on the ground. And that's just going to be with the brush that you use to smoosh your snowman in and warm white. You're just going to set the cup down in some snow, and I took it off to the side a little bit and kind of tailed off. So easy peasy, warm white. I got a little bit on my brown edge, but that's okay, because I can always come back with brown and redo it. But you just want to set the cup down into the snow. And there you go. Sign it, add a hanger, a bow, whatever you want, and you've got yourself a cute little snowman in a cup. Pat yourself on the back. You did a great job.